If there ever was a perfect bodybuilder in regard to aesthetics and symmetry, it was Frank Zane. Every body part was in perfect balance to the others, and every part was flawless. He looked as if he were chiseled from stone, cut, defined, and always razor sharp. His was the classic physique that any man would admire and any woman would desire. It wasn't freaky, it was pretty. And at a time when bodybuilding was attempting to gain a broader audience, he was the ideal representation of physical perfection to the general public. Quality over quantity. Frank wasn't the biggest bodybuilder you'll ever see. In fact, when he first won the Mr. Olympia crown in 1977, he weighed just 190 pounds at 5 foot 10 inches and 4% body fat before the discovery of clenbuterol. If someone were to go on a message board with those stats, he'd be derided for being too small. But in Frank's day, it was more about muscle quality than quantity. Sheer size for the sake of size was actually shunned. Shape was what ruled, and a small waist was the most impressive attribute to the contest judges at the time. The goal was to look not like a monster, but a god, and Frank Zane got it as close as one can get it. As with all assumptions about what compounds anyone used, it's essentially conjecture. We can speculate what they preferred based on the end result, but results vary as much from genetics, training protocol, and diet than it does from drugs. But in Frank's case, we know a few things. He was affectionately known as the chemist due to his methodical and analytical approach to enhancement. Frank was also the forerunner of the use of two compounds that were not well known to most bodybuilders at the time. One was T4. Franks realized that the thyroid was the body's furnace, and it forced to burn more fuel. A hyped-up thyroid resulted in the body using body fat for energy. Frank's old-school approach to training consisted of high volume with little rest in between sets. As it got closer to contest time, the reps got higher and the rests got shorter, all in an effort to create more pump and burn more fat. Apparently, it worked.
600 to 700 capsules a day, but it worked. What's the worst that could happen? You can get bloated, nauseous, diarrhea, so avoid that.
The big secret. Another secret of some of the top bodybuilders on the Venice Beach crowd, such as Frank, Arnold, Sergio, and Chuck Sipes, was the use of injectable amino acids. This was essentially a form of purified collagen protein. By injecting in directly to the bloodstream, there was no digestive process, and the body utilized all of the aminos. This resulted in extraordinarily rapid gains. The only thing comparable today would be super plasma protein, which also requires no digestion since the peptides are already in the molecular structure that is present in the bloodstream. Therefore, it's immediately recognized. This equates to instant muscle, and it probably is the most overlooked advantage to increased gains than any other substance besides steroids themselves. Zane was also a big believer in supplements. Unfortunately, what was available at the time was limited and crude. Substances like desiccated liver, one-a-day vitamins, brewer's yeast, and bone marrow. The more progressive guys eschewed the soy protein and used the Blair milk and egg protein powder. Colostrum from veterinarian supply houses was also on the list. Anything that could possibly grow more muscle.
I don't recommend this for anybody, but I was very much an experimenter in those days. 80 to 100 capsules each time I ate.
Talking steroids. As for actual steroids, this is probably close to what Frank used. Keep in mind, the dosages may seem low, and there are a few reasons for that. First of all, the notion of using dosages far beyond what recommended by a doctor was just not done. Remember, steroids were legal and prescribed at the time. Also, most of the gains were obtained through years of hardcore training. The drugs were just the finishing touch before competitions, and probably most significant is the fact that they were farm-grade substances. And we don't mean farm-grade like really good UGL. This was the real shiz made by American pharmaceutical companies, and the quality was demonstrably superior to what is available through most sources today. Cleaner, purer, safer, and stronger. When people say so-and-so source makes farm-grade, more often than not, they don't know what they're talking about. There is no comparison.
I would specialize on weak points. If you do get out of shape, you're going to lose a lot of time getting back there. So stay where you're at.
The Frank Zane steroid cycle. Weeks 1 to 8. 100 milligrams ampoule of primobolan a day. Good luck finding real primo these days. If you do get a good UG source, expect to increase the dosage by an extra 200 milligrams a week. Weeks 1 to 2. D-Bol Kickstart. Yes, D-Bol was a mainstay with most guys. Nothing puts on mass quicker. It also increased appetite, which was desirable in the beginning of a cycle. It wasn't until later that the dieting became intense. Weeks 2 to 6. 25 milligrams of Winstrol a day. A comparable UG dose would be double that. Weeks 4 to 8. 25 mcgs of Synthroid a day. Weeks 1 to 8. Daily injections of amino acid serum. The best substitute for this would be GIR. It is the only product to contain superplasma serum and to work in a similar manner to injectable amino acids.
And when you take high doses, you do get a drug-like effect. I never relied on any of that stuff. I wanted to get that effect from supplements.
So did Frank Zane not use actual steroids? It is a bit arcane not to discuss bodybuilders of the late 50s, more so Olympia bodybuilders, and ask if they were taking steroids. We believe that they were steroids early adopters. For those competing in those days, steroids dictate the advantage. For such a wonder drug, could Frank Zane, the chemist and 3-time Mr. Olympia, fight the urge not to make a brew for himself? In all absolute, we dig how Frank Zane achieved his sculpted, amazingly defined physique. Getting to that bearing without any help from steroids could mean intensely insane and strict training with Vince Gironda. Given that he attributed his bone structure and ability to hold muscle mass to his genes, it would still be, for most, impossible to attain that kind of build without steroids. Forgive our skepticism that Frank Zane was all natural during his competitive years, but we are not against him if he truly did ever take steroids. Did Vince Gironda allow steroids? We always wonder if he was able to talk to Gironda as to how much he would take based on his own calculations as a bodybuilding science and chemistry teacher. Wasn't it Gironda who looked at bodybuilding scientifically too? Also, in those days, there were no growth hormones or insulin, only steroids. So did master and student really make it their resolve to completely do away with any steroids? Or did they keep a bit to themselves? With respect to Gironda, who we respect, to compete naturally in Mr. Olympia during those days, Frank Zane could have had the best genetics any man could have gotten. This reminds us of Clark Kent when he was thrown to the earth. His genes were literally building him up to go, grow, and glow in superhuman form even without any supplements except solar. It's all in his genes. All Clark Kent had to do was optimize, control, and train his abilities, which were all thanks to his Kryptonian genetic makeup. We suppose in creating that analogy, we would be comparing almost all of the bodybuilders today to Superman. At one point, everyone praised their genetics and training, which is, of course, befitting. However, to say that steroids have little, if nothing, to do with how they hulked or gone so massive is totally bordering to deceit. We've come across some of Frank Zane's interviews, and in most of them, he never acknowledged the way Gironda trained him. It could be that he also had his own gym, and he wanted to have his own personal methods running it. Or he does not want to ride on his late trainer's popularity when he decided to put up his own gym. Or maybe Frank Zane did use steroids, but Gironda did not consent. Zane did fail to get a 4-peat losing to Schwarzenegger, who seemed to have really up his game with steroids, of course. That's all for this video, folks. See you another time.